He didn't hesitate. 10 years later, he finally said it out loud. Ooh, fair. And the second that word left Kody's mouth, you could feel the air leave the room. Because this wasn't just a recap episode. This was a reckoning. We need to start in the park. Not with the catfish. Not with the catfish. Not with Jen. Not even with Robyn. With that so-called apology, Kody says he apologized to Meri that day. But watch it again. It wasn't an apology. It was a performance of closure. There's a difference. An apology says, I hurt you. A performance says, can we be done now? And Meri, she knows the difference. You can see it in the way she holds her posture. Not defensive. Not angry. Just aware. That awareness is new. And that's what makes this finale uncomfortable. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Meri isn't reacting the way she used to. 10 years ago, the catfishing nearly shattered her. Lonely in Vegas. Emotionally isolated. Divorced on paper for the family. That wasn't just scandal. That was abandonment layered with humiliation. And when she says she stopped using her voice because she felt punished every time she spoke up, that's not reality TV drama. That's long-term emotional conditioning. Imagine that for a second. You speak up, you're iced out, you express pain, you're labeled difficult. After enough repetitions, silence feels safer. And now suddenly she has Jen, which brings us to the real spark of this episode. Kody versus Jen. Footage, Jen. It's almost uncomfortable how much he reacts to her. He questions whether she's a safe, suggests she helped cause the breakup, mocks her humor, but here's what's interesting. Jen didn't enter the marriage. She entered Meri's clarity. And sometimes, when someone finds clarity, the person who benefited from their confusion feels threatened. That tension isn't about loyalty, it's about influence. Kody doesn't understand why Jen encouraged Meri to find her voice, but maybe the better question is, why did that bother him so much? And then, Janelle drops the grenade. She says she heard Jen tell Meri to take the money and leave years ago. Vegas? Business ties ended over it. Jen says it never happened. Christine thinks it might have been a joke. Meri says she didn't even hear about it until later. So now we're left with something heavier than gossip. Memory versus memory. And here's what makes that dangerous. When families fracture, everyone rewrites history in self-protective ways. So who's lying? Or is no one lying? Just remembering differently. And if that's true, what else from those Vegas years isn't as clear as they've been telling us? Hold that, because we haven't even touched the deeper fracture yet. Now we pivot to Robyn. And this is where the temperature shifts. Christine says she didn't trust Robyn because she'd confide in her and somehow Kody would know. Then she'd get in trouble. That's not a small accusation. That's breach of trust energy. And Kody's response? He says everyone scapegoats Robyn. But then, and this is key, he admits Robyn told him about the catfishing. He says that wasn't betrayal. Robyn says she was trying to help. And this is where it gets complicated, because Meri says something subtle but explosive. There were moments when private conversations she had with Robyn somehow reached the catfish. Let that sit there. That's not a rumor. That's confusion. And confusion is worse than anger. Because anger at least has direction. Confusion makes you question your own perception. And when a mutual friend of Robyn's was in contact with the catfish, now we're not just reopening history, we're reopening trust. And then it happens. Kody explodes, yelling that the catfish situation was not emotional vulnerability, not manipulation, not exploitation. Fair. That word reframes everything. It removes nuance, it removes loneliness, it removes context, it places moral blame squarely on Meri. And after 10 years of saying it was complicated, he simplifies it into betrayal. Why now? Why use that word now? Is it anger resurfacing? Or is it easier to label her a villain than admit he emotionally checked out first? That question is the heartbeat of this finale. And we're not done. Because just when the emotional temperature peaks, they show Ron. And Kody smiles watching Meri with him, which is either maturity or something else entirely. Let's talk about that smile. They roll the clip of Meri with Ron. She's lighter, relaxed, almost playful. And Kody smiles, not tight, not sarcastic. A real smile. After calling her catfish situation and fair, after reliving a decade of resentment, he smiles. Now pause. If you're truly over someone, truly detached. You don't need to redefine their past to protect your ego. And you definitely don't have an emotional spike when they start dating. So what was that? Relief? Guilt? Or something that looks suspiciously like jealousy? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Control feels powerful until it disappears. And Meri doesn't look controlled anymore. She looks independent, which might be harder for Kody to process than betrayal ever was. Now let's pivot to Robyn, because this is where the emotional accountability question gets loud. She says she doesn't need to apologize for anything. Not for telling Kody about the catfish. Not for the miscommunications, not for the trust fractures. Nothing. And that's fascinating. Because in fractured families, apologies aren't just about guilt. They're about repair. And refusing to apologize, even symbolically, sends a message. It says, I see no fault in my role. Now, maybe she genuinely believes that, or maybe she feels constantly blamed and refuses to validate that narrative. But here's the bigger question. When everyone around you feels hurt, is it strength to stand firm? Or is it emotional isolation? That tension is what's keeping this family from real closure. And this is the pattern that quietly defined the entire one-on-one finale. Nobody is fully lying, but nobody is fully owning. Kody reframes the past. Robyn stands firm. Janelle questions memory. Jen denies the comment. Christine observes from the side. Meri stays measured. Measured, that's the word, Junko. Because if you compare Meri now to Meri 10 years ago, something has shifted. She isn't begging for validation. She isn't pleading to be understood. She's detached. And detachment isn't cold. It's survival after too much emotional chaos. When she says she'd be open to kindness and peace, that's not reconciliation energy. That's boundary energy. And that difference matters. Now here's the deeper layer. No one is saying out loud. Why reopen the catfish story now? Why drag up decade-old pain in the final hour of a season? Because unresolved narratives create relevance. And relevance keeps the show alive. But here's the risk. When you keep revisiting trauma for storyline fuel, at some point it stops being cathartic and starts feeling exploitative. The catfish wasn't just a mistake. It was the symptom of emotional starvation. And calling it an affair without acknowledging the isolation leading up to it, that's rewriting history to protect pride. And then we're left with the biggest lingering question. Where does this show go from here? Plural marriage is done. The marriages have fractured. The tension now isn't about sharing a husband. It's about sharing a narrative. Who gets to define what happened? Who gets labeled villain? Who gets sympathy? Who gets redemption? And when Kody hesitates about friendship with Meri, that hesitation says everything. Not anger, not love. Unfinished emotion. Because if something is fully dead, it doesn't provoke that much reaction. Here's what this finale really exposed. Not just distrust, not just resentment, but ego wounds. Everyone in that room has a version of the story that protects them. But healing requires someone to risk looking wrong, and no one seems willing to be first. So we're left suspended, not in reconciliation, not in total collapse, just unresolved, which might actually be the most honest ending they've ever given us. Now I want to ask you something real. When someone from your past reframes your worst moment in the harshest possible way, do you fight back? Or do you let silence speak? And do you think Robyn owes an apology? Or is she just refusing to be the family scapegoat? Because this isn't just reality TV drama. It's about how people rewrite history after love breaks. And that's something most of us understand more than we'd like to admit.